Good morning. I'm very pleased to address you today to discuss an existential issue for the nation of Vanuatu and indeed the entire planet, climate change. For more than 5 decades, science has been providing stark warning about the chemical and physical consequences of greenhouse gas emissions. Sadly, the short-sighted and economically driven policies of many states meant that little heed was paid, and today Vanuatu's people suffer from the insidious rise in sea levels that eats away at our villages, ocean acidification that is dissolving our reefs, increasing sea surface temperatures bleaching our corals and seagrasses, landslides that erase entire villages and plantations, and prolonged droughts that shrivel and kill our subsistence crops before they can even be harvested. This climate suffering is being experienced right now. Over the last 7 days, Vanuatu has been hit by 2 Category 4 cyclones, which leave us in a state of emergency today. All islands and 100% of our population is affected, with schools and clinics ripped from their foundations, infrastructure washed away, and food and water security severely compromised. This is unjust, as we are not responsible for the greenhouse gas emissions that are causing this crisis. Friends, this is not just a Vanuatu problem. What we are experiencing now, and have faced for many years, we see the rest of the world beginning to feel. We empathize with you and hope that we have the collective courage to turn this canoe around. 7 years ago, 196 countries adopted the Paris Agreement, the international treaty many hoped would finally take us off the path of planetary destruction. Countries around the world celebrated this landmark first step towards what we hoped would be accountable, transparent, and life-saving requirements to reduce the impact of global warming. But unfortunately, the pledges, promises, and commitments made under this agreement take us well beyond the safe operating limit of 1.5 degrees. Little effort has been expended on the human rights-related violations linked to climate change, and countries still tend to see the Paris Agreement as the only international law relevant to climate change. Beyond the UNFCCC, however, other instruments under agreed international law already contain clear obligations to prevent harm to the environment and protect human rights. Specifically, we see climate-relevant obligations in the Charter of the United Nations, the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, the International Covenants on Civil and Political Rights and on Economic, Social and Cultural Rights, the Conventions on the Rights of the Child, the United Nations Convention on the Law of the Sea, the Vienna Convention for the Protection of the Ozone Layer, the Montreal Protocol on substances that deplete the ozone layer, the Convention on Biological Diversity, the United Nations Convention to Combat Desertification, and more. But how can the obligations under a wide body of existing treaties be applied to the climate crisis? Pacific Island University students ask themselves and others these questions. Those discussions grew into a truly international call for clarity and for justice. Vanuatu accepted the call from our youth and has since been leading the campaign for an advisory opinion on climate change from the International Court of Justice. The United Nations International Court of Justice, or ICJ, is the only principal organ of the UN system that has not yet been given an opportunity to help address the climate crisis. To get to the court, Vanuatu and dozens of co-sponsoring states will table a resolution at the United Nations General Assembly. If the resolution is adopted, either by unanimous consensus or by a simple majority of votes, then the International Court of Justice will consider our question. You can read the full resolution on www.vanuatuicj.com. But in summary, we are asking 2 simple questions. What are the obligations that all states have under a range of international laws to protect the climate system and the environment from greenhouse gases? And 2, what are the legal consequences when states actually do cause climate-related harm to other states or to future generations? It is our view that this question should have been asked long before now, and that the answer given by the world's highest court will help countries get back on track in upholding the rule of international law and bring human rights thinking into energy and climate decisions moving forward. I want to be very clear that this initiative is not intended to name or shame any particular nation. And despite being brought to the UN's highest legal body, we are not suing anybody. There will be no winners or losers. and no state will be required to do anything as a result of the advisory opinion of the court. Importantly, we are only asking for clarification of legal obligations already agreed under international law and not anything new. The question is also forward-looking, considering both historical emissions but also emissions of today and the future. The primary goal of this exercise is to bring clarity to all states so that we can take better action moving forward. The resulting advisory opinion will help states revise and enhance their nationally determined contributions under the Paris Agreement and strengthen domestic laws and policies. The advisory opinion will likely identify gaps in international law, which will help us as we build and improve our multilateral climate negotiation processes. The advisory opinion will also ensure we base our relationships on the adherence to the rule of international law. As we have seen with the recent destabilizing war in Ukraine, we must prioritize an international legal framework that is clear on what is acceptable state behavior and what is not. The rule of law is foundational to the United Nations and to its mission of peace. From the smallest villages in the Pacific Islands to the global stage, the rule of law is all that stands between peace and stability and a climate-safe world and utter destruction. The rule of law protects the vulnerable and is the basis of international cooperation, especially in regards to climate change. Vanuatu has heard the strong call and expectation from grassroots youth movements and indeed over 1,700 civil society organizations from around the world to draft a forward-looking, indeed intergenerational question. Colleagues, the focus of the question is on the protection of fundamental human rights of present and future generations, a critical shift in narrative which may yield greater climate action and ambition among all states in the global community. I think we have been speaking about climate change in terms of degrees of Celsius and tons of carbon for too long. This is not relevant to many decision makers. It is time we reframe climate decision making in terms of human rights. So what is next? The UN General Assembly will hold a session on the Climate Justice Resolution on the 29th of March this year. There are three options. 1, the resolution will be adopted by consensus if all states agree. 2, the resolution will be adopted by simple majority vote if any state shamefully calls for a vote. 3, the resolution fails to be adopted, which is not expected. The early co-sponsoring nations were published on the 1st of March, and as of today, at least 113 other countries have confirmed they will support the adoption of this UNGA resolution. So we are nearly there. But I need your help to ensure that this resolution is adopted. Every country's support counts. There are still countries in the global north, and indeed in Latin America, Africa, and Asia, which have not yet confirmed their support. If you have networks or contacts with influence, now is the time to mobilize them before the adoption session in a few weeks' time. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, friends, it is time for the world's highest court to give us the clarity we all need to do more. We are out of time in Vanuatu, and our children need us to demonstrate the required leadership. Know that in Vanuatu you have a staunch ally committed to fighting for climate justice. Thank you.